You spend a lot of time now traveling the world talking about entrepreneurship. Do you see flavors of entrepreneurship, or do you think that there's actually almost like a common bond of entrepreneurs globally?
Well, I think that's one of the questions where the answer is both, right? And so the common bonds are a willingness to envision a possible future that doesn't exist right now, a willingness to take risk, the grit to go through what is always, like I wasn't kidding, like every PayPal, LinkedIn, every single startup, you get to some point where you're like, why did I think this was a good idea? And that difficulty of going through that. Like for example, people say, failure is great. It's like, no, failure is always painful, difficult, and embarrassing. It's learning that's really important. And so all of that, I think, is common the world over. And like, for example, some of the key insights for EF is like, look, talent is distributed, right? There's technical talent everywhere. There's entrepreneurial talent everywhere. It's basically, you take a population of 1 million people, it's the same percentage roughly anywhere you go. Maybe the immigration changes a little bit here and there, but it's distributed. So the question is realizing it. And all of that is common. Then there's some differences, right? So for example, some areas tend to want entrepreneurship within kind of like, for example, more well understood business models. Like that was one of the reasons I was highlighting in the Silicon Valley question, the business model question change. Because more often than not, when I'm out and about in the world, they're like, for example, like if I'm in many different, actually I won't pull out any specific countries, I don't feel like they're being called out, but like I get more e-commerce pitches when I'm out and about the world. It's like, well, people will buy this. There's a market for it. This is how I sell it. This is how I do the supply chain. This is how I do the operational line. And you're like, okay, that's a great business. But I get less of and then maybe this wild new thing will actually happen. And so that's part of the reason why when think about like what are the kinds of things that are possible, here in Europe, Singapore, where you have a deep technical talent, kind of vision for how things change. It's like, well, actually, in fact, the kinds of questions around, well, how would you create an entirely new market? How would you think about this in a different way? How would you re-envision, whether it's, medicine or education or what is a completely new application for augmented reality versus, oh yeah, we know people buy this kind of thing already, so let's sell it to them. So there's variations within that. And then I think, well, actually, I'll tell the funniest one, because this one, I think everyone knows that China is hugely entrepreneurial. I had this funny meeting when I was over there in 2007 with an entrepreneur who was doing e-commerce, home furniture delivery. And I was like, well, isn't that a vertical? And he's like, well, yeah, here in China, that's about 80 million people. And I was like, oh, right. Verticals are much larger. Oh yeah, fine. You're fine. You'll be fine. That was like, it was kind of the classic thing you would say in Silicon Valley is, no, go more general, have a wider market, have an ambition for a larger scale, which I was all prepared to give him that speech. And I was like, all right, China's a lot larger. You'll be fine.